The silence in the house had changed. It wasn't the comforting stillness James used to enjoy, the quiet that allowed thoughts to breathe, to wander. This was different. It was the kind of silence that whispered behind your back, that lingered too long in locked rooms and ended phone calls a second too late. James sat in his wheelchair near the window, watching dusk slide its fingers across the suburban street. A nurse had just left, and Emma was upstairs getting ready for her birthday dinner. The house smelled faintly of vanilla candles and imported perfume. He closed his eyes. He hadn't always been like this, still, reduced, less. Before the accident, he'd been a man of movement, athletic, powerful, a corporate strategist who commanded conference rooms and pulled million-dollar deals out of thin air. Now, he was the man people pitied, the husband who had to ask for help to reach a high shelf, the broken man with too much time, and a wife too good to leave. At least, that's what she wanted the world to believe. 3 weeks ago, James had heard her whisper it, her voice low, too intimate, tinged with laughter. "Don't worry, baby, he can't hear us. He barely moves anymore." He could still feel the cold shock of it, the way her words sliced through the air and gutted him from the inside out. At first, he'd thought it was grief or stress. Maybe she just needed space. But then came the late night calls in the guest bathroom, the girl nights that ended with her slipping into bed at 2 a.m., makeup freshened but not removed, and the final straw, the echo of her voice from the kitchen. "No, I can't tonight. He's suspicious, but after his birthday, he won't see it coming." That was when the plan had begun, not the rage. No, rage was easy. James had been a tactician his whole life. Rage burned too fast. He chose patience. While she laughed with her lover, he studied, listened, learned. He rigged his old smartphone under the table, left voice notes running during her long showers, synced her iCloud messages to his laptop while she slept. The betrayal revealed itself like peeling wallpaper, ugly, layered, old. He saw her real face in every lie. Tonight was her birthday. The house was decorated in soft golden tones. A catering company was arriving soon. Friends and family would fill the home, clinking glasses and complimenting Emma's beauty, her grace, her strength. They would toast to her devotion. And then, when the lights dimmed and the cake arrived, James would roll forward, smile warmly, and offer his gift, not the necklace she expected, not the ring, but a simple USB drive slotted into a projector REQ to autoplay. Footage, screenshots, dates, times, voices. Let the room decide what kind of woman she really was. James exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling over him like armor. He was no longer the helpless man she thought she'd married. Not tonight. Tonight, he would reclaim his dignity, and in doing so, set fire to the perfect little world she thought she controlled. The days after James uncovered the truth blurred into a quiet ritual of precision. While Emma floated through the house like a silk ghost, smiling, sighing, rehearsing her lines of affection, James became a man reborn in the shadows. He mapped out a new identity for himself, no longer her dependent husband, but her unknowing executioner. Each lie she told him, each kiss she planted on his forehead with fingers that had just texted "I miss you" to Mark, became another nail in her pristine facade. She had no idea the man in the wheelchair was listening. He bought a second phone, a burner. From it, he installed silent syncing apps that mirrored her texts and calls in real time. He listened to her planned weekend escapes under the guise of wellness retreats. He watched hotel confirmations appear in her inbox like clockwork. He even captured the way her voice changed when she spoke to Mark. Lighter, younger, dripping with seduction. At first, it sickened him, but over time, that sickness hardened into something else. Something sharper, not revenge, purpose. Each night, as Emma slept soundly beside him, back turned as if sleeping next to a stranger, James reviewed the growing archive of betrayal. Audio clips, time-stamped screenshots, even blurry CCTV footage from a hotel lobby he'd paid a local PI to retrieve. Mark's hand on her lower back, Emma's smile as she leaned in. She wasn't even hiding it well anymore, but the real twist came on a Wednesday afternoon. James was at the private clinic for physical therapy. His therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Clara, had become one of the few people he could trust. She was sharp, observant, and more than a little suspicious of Emma. That day, as she adjusted the resistance on his wheelchair exercises, Clara leaned in close and whispered, "James, I overheard your wife talking to someone in the lobby last week. She didn't see me. She said you've been mentally unstable since the crash and that she's worried you'll harm yourself or someone else." James froze. She asked the clinic director if that could be documented in case she needed to make a legal case for separation. Something inside him went ice cold. It wasn't just infidelity now. It was betrayal layered with cruelty. She was laying the groundwork to paint him as unstable, to rob him of what little dignity he still held, to take the house, the accounts, maybe even place him under guardianship, legally powerless. That night, as Emma lit candles for dinner and told him about her upcoming yoga retreat, James smiled and nodded, his mind already calculating. He would no longer settle for quiet exposure. He would humiliate her in the very theater she had built for herself, her birthday, surrounded by friends with champagne flutes raised when she least expected it. But first, he needed an ally. He approached her carefully, told her the truth about the affair, the recordings, Emma's manipulation. Clara didn't flinch. Instead, she offered to help. Her brother worked in home automation and surveillance, quiet installations, discrete data backups. Within 3 days, James had a system running through the house that even Emma wouldn't notice. Tiny cameras disguised as motion sensors, audio pickups linked directly to his private drive. The final stroke was a birthday slideshow Emma had requested, a tribute to her life to be shown at the party. James offered to handle it. She smiled, kissed his cheek, called him her sweet savior. He would give her the slideshow she asked for, and so much more. He watched her that evening, laughing on the phone in the hallway, barefoot, wine in hand, utterly unaware that her world was beginning to splinter beneath her. He didn't hate her, not really, but he would make her remember every smile, every lie, every I love you whispered into someone else's ear. He'd make her feel, and that would be enough. James never expected to feel so calm while orchestrating a storm. The files were in order. The footage was cut. The presentation, harmless in appearance, was neatly stored on a labeled USB drive hidden in the bottom compartment of his wheelchair cushion. Each element was timed, precise, devastating. And yet, something gnawed at him. It wasn't guilt. That part of him had been burned away in the slow agony of betrayal. It was something stranger, a quiet, disorienting fear. What if this wasn't the end of her games? The day before Emma's birthday, Clara met James at the clinic for what was supposed to be a routine strength assessment. But instead of therapy bands, she brought a manila envelope and a face grim with concern. I thought you should see this, she said. Inside the envelope were copies of documents Emma had filed, emails to a divorce attorney, signed declarations about James's emotional instability, even a fabricated incident report claiming he'd thrown a glass bottle at her during an episode. The level of detail was staggering. False witness statements, timestamps, a narrative of a man unraveling under the weight of his own bitterness. She's not just planning to leave you, Clara said, voice taut. She's planning to destroy you, legally, socially, hell, maybe even medically. James sat back in stunned silence, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair until his knuckles turned white. The evidence was damning and brilliant. And what wasn't reckless after all? She was methodical. He realized then she wasn't just counting on his physical limitations. She was betting on his silence, on his shame, on his unwillingness to fight. That's when something shifted inside him. A gear clicked. The plan wasn't enough. Not yet. He needed to break through her mask. He needed to expose her not only to the world, but to herself. So James changed tactics. That night, he surprised her. He rode into the kitchen, smiling gently, and said, I've been thinking about your birthday, and I want to make it special. Why don't you invite whoever you want, your friends, your coworkers, even Mark? She blinked. Mark, James, are you sure? I want to meet the man you spent so much time talking about. You've always said he's just a friend, right? She studied him carefully, like a chess master reading a board. Right, she said slowly, just a friend. And she smiled that polished, dazzling smile, the one she used when she thought she was winning. The next afternoon, James requested to meet Clara privately. We need to prepare for every outcome, he told her. If she turns this on me, if she tries to twist it even after the reveal, I need people there who will back me up. People with eyes wide open. Clara nodded. You'll have them. She arranged for 2 colleagues, both quiet, observant types, who had also noticed Emma's growing coldness at the clinic, to attend as guests. Not spies. Witnesses. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, James wheeled himself into his office and made one final addition to the slideshow. He recorded a video of himself, just 5 minutes, speaking directly to the camera. I don't show this to embarrass you, Emma, he said, voice level but low with emotion. I show it because the truth matters, because dignity matters. You made me feel like a burden, a mistake, a broken man. But I am none of those things. He stared into the lens. I'm still James, and I deserve to be seen. He saved the file and placed it at the end of the presentation, after the texts, after the images, after the last damning hotel receipt. When the birthday arrived, the house glowed with curated perfection. White roses, gold tableware, laughter bubbling through the air like champagne. James watched Emma glide from guest to guest in her sleek emerald dress, every movement rehearsed, every word chosen. He noticed how her hand lingered on Mark's shoulder when she introduced him to people. This is my colleague Mark, she said, just loud enough for James to hear. He's been such a support since James, James said nothing. He didn't even blink. Instead, he looked across the room at Claire, who nodded subtly. The projector was in place. The slideshow was ready. But before the reveal, something unexpected happened. Emma approached him with a drink and a smile too sweet. Been thinking, she said, about us, about how I might have been distant lately. I think you deserve honesty, James. I want to talk. After the party, just you and me. Her voice trembled just slightly for the first time he saw it. Fear, not guilt, not regret, but fear. She didn't know what he knew, but she knew something was coming. James took the drink with a calm hand. Of course, he said softly, after the party. And in that moment, he felt the shift again. This time, it wasn't dread, it was power. Real, steady, grounded power. Not the kind that comes from rage or revenge, but from knowing that the person who tried to break you is finally breaking themselves without your help. All he had to do now was press play. The evening arrived with unnerving serenity. Soft jazz spilled through hidden speakers. The scent of citrus and gardenia drifted from high-end candles, and the chandeliers cast golden halos over the house that Emma had curated like a showroom. Her laughter rang out in gentle waves, perfectly pitched for each guest, each compliment. She was the star of her own stage, and tonight, her birthday, was her standing ovation. But James was done playing the supporting role. He sat calmly in his wheelchair by the bay window, his navy suit crisply pressed, his expression unreadable. From across the room, he watched her perform, laughing with a neighbor, refilling wine for her friends, sneaking glances at Mark, who hovered in the periphery like a smug shadow. No one saw the storm brewing behind James's stillness. He didn't need to say a word. Everything was already in motion. The guests settled after dinner, glasses in hand, conversation mellowed by wine. Emma tapped her fork gently against a flute and stood near the center of the room. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, she said, glowing. It means the world to me to share this evening with people I care about and with James, who has been so strong this past year. You've shown me what real resilience looks like. A few guests applauded. James gave a tight smile, nodding slightly. She walked over and pressed a kiss to his cheek, but he didn't react. The kiss hung in the air, hollow and performative. Now, she said, turning to the crowd, James prepared something special, a video tribute. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm just as curious as all of you. That was her final miscalculation. James gave a slight nod toward Clara, standing near the projector. The lights dimmed. The screen blinked once. A soft piano melody began, Emma's favorite piece. The first few slides displayed innocent, happy images, her as a child, college days, wedding photos with James. A few guests murmured appreciatively. Then came the shift. It began slowly, a screenshot of a message, a time-stamped phone call, a reservation at the Rosewood Inn, Emma's name listed beside Mark's. The melody faded, silence filled the room like rising smoke. Emma stiffened, her mouth twitched, but she didn't move. Then came the surveillance photo, Emma entering the hotel with Mark. Another, her hand slipping into his as they passed the concierge. Next, a recording, her voice clear and breathless. You don't have to worry about him. He can't do anything. He doesn't even know we were here last. Whispers erupted around the room. Chairs creaked as guests leaned forward, uncertain if what they were watching was real. Mark paled and took a step back, his eyes darting toward the door. Emma let out a soft, shaking breath. Jay, stop this. But the screen kept playing. A text thread appeared. Her words to Mark. After his birthday, I'll tell him. He'll be heartbroken, but I'll say he's paranoid. The lawyer's drafting the psych eval narrative now. Gasps followed. Emma's closest friend covered her mouth. James didn't look at Emma. He watched the guests instead, their faces contorting from confusion to horror. Then the final video played. It was James. Seated in his office, eyes steady, voice quiet but unyielding. I gave my life to someone I trusted. I endured pain most people won't understand. But I held on, thinking that love meant loyalty, that marriage meant partnership. What I've come to understand is that trust is fragile. And when broken, it doesn't cut like a knife. It rots you from the inside. Tonight, I choose to stop rotting. I choose to speak. This is not vengeance. This is truth. When the video ended, the room sat in stunned silence. And then someone, Claudius Colleg, started clapping just once. But others joined, not in mockery, not for the spectacle, but because they understood James wasn't a man seeking revenge. He was a man reclaiming himself. Emma stood frozen. Her eyes glistened, mascara streaking faintly. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Slowly, she turned to her guests. No, it's not. He wasn't supposed to. Her voice cracked. Mark was already edging toward the front door, avoiding eye contact with anyone. James turned to Clara and whispered something. She nodded. I think it's best everyone heads out now, Clara said, her voice calm but firm. This has been a lot. The guests began gathering their coats, offering awkward apologies or stunned stares. A few cast sympathetic looks toward James, none toward Emma. She was left standing in the center of the room, the queen of an empire that had collapsed mid-set. As the last guest slipped out, the house fell into eerie silence. Emma looked at James, her voice small now. You ruined me. No, he said, wheeling toward the hallway. You did that all on your own. He passed her without another glance. The projector screen still flickered in the background, paused on the last frame of his video, frozen on his face, not broken, not angry, just free. The morning after the party dawned gray and indifferent, as if the sky itself had no interest in offering closure. James sat in the quiet of the living room, the echo of last night still lingering in the air like distant thunder. The rose petals on the floor remained scattered from the centerpiece Emma had arranged, now trampled and dull. Empty glasses, tilted chairs, and half-eaten cake bore witness to a night where illusions were shattered and silence became the loudest scream. Emma hadn't come downstairs. She hadn't come to bed either. He wasn't surprised. James wasn't angry anymore, not really. What he felt now was harder to define, something deeper than rage, but quieter. A stillness, an understanding that what had been broken between them had died long before the evidence had been shown. The affair, the lies, even the attempt to paint him as unstable, those were only the final nails in a coffin she'd been building in secret. She had buried their marriage. He had simply written the eulogy. A knock at the door stirred him from thought. Clara stood outside holding a takeout tray with 2 coffees and a small paper bag. Her presence felt grounding, like someone reaching through the fog. "You okay?" she asked gently. James took the coffee and gave a small nod. "Better than I expected, worse than I hoped." Clara sat beside him, setting the bag on the table. "She's still upstairs," he said. "Let her stay there," Claire replied. "Let her sit with what she's done." James took a slow sip, the warmth from the cup bleeding into his hands. "It's strange. I imagined it differently, more vindicating." But he hesitated. Even truth doesn't heal everything. There was a long pause before Clara spoke again. "No, but it stops the bleeding." They sat in silence, not needing to fill it with false comfort. Clara's presence wasn't that of a savior. James didn't need one, but of a witness. Someone who had seen him at his lowest and chose not to look away. Not out of pity, but out of respect. And that meant something. By afternoon, Emma finally emerged. No makeup, no designer dress, no mask. Her eyes were swollen, her posture hunched. She stood near the base of the staircase like a ghost trying to return to the world of the living. James looked up but said nothing. "Hey, I didn't know you had it in you," she said, her voice brittle. He met her gaze, steady and calm. "Neither did I, until I remembered who I was before you decided I wasn't enough." Her face contorted for a moment, grief and defensiveness wrestling for control. But she didn't argue, didn't apologize either. And then she left. No suitcases, no speech. She walked out the door. James didn't ask where she was going. He didn't care. Some losses weren't meant to be chased. Later that evening, James sat in his study, the projector now gone, the files archived. He reached into a small velvet box on the desk, a gift he had planned to give Emma before everything fell apart. A ring, white gold, elegant. He held it in his palm for a long while, then quietly wheeled outside and dropped it into the koi pond. It disappeared beneath the surface with barely a ripple. That was the goodbye he needed. In the weeks that followed, the house slowly transformed. The walls seemed taller. The silence felt different, no longer oppressive, but open. Room for possibility, room for peace. James kept going to therapy. He picked up reading again. Clara stopped by often, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just herself. There was no rush between them, no forced intimacy. But when she touched his hand as she left one afternoon, she didn't pull away, and neither did he. He wasn't whole, but he was healing. And in that, there was dignity, there was power, there was hope.